introduction. I may need like.
You're being recorded. Go ahead.
Okay. Presentation is fairly short, and this also stemmed from a discussion we were having.
Can you introduce yourself and title of the presentation?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Stuff is there.
Delani, and my presentation is Rediscovering. Is called Rediscovering the World, which maybe is like a broad definition of what it's about. But it stemmed from a discussion. I can't remember exactly who was having on a thread on Facebook. Some of us, but because someone was really excited because they discovered the Piri Reis map, and Piri Reis was a medieval maritime explorer from the Ottoman Empire, and the maps that he had were more sophisticated than anything that Europe at the time had, and people were really excited about this. It's like, how come nobody knows about this, blah blah blah. And because I had read a little more some time ago about like discoveries and maps and planispheres and stuff like that, I thought I'd put this together because some of the commonly taught history that we have about the age of discovery and discovering like certain things in the world is pretty much a Eurocentric view of it, because there's quite a lot of evidence that says otherwise.
Just click the screen.
Okay, so everyone knows who this guy is. It's like Christopher Columbus. You have Columbus Day in the States. He discovered the Americas in 1492, which is what most history books would teach you. But if you, James Joyce, most famously said Christopher Columbus, as everyone knows, is honored by posterity because he was the last person to discover America. Okay? Because he was in 1492, he was like 4,000 years before him, in 10,000 AD, you had Leif Erikson, who founded a colony in Vinland, which is Newfoundland right now. And that was quite famously known in that part of Norway and Sweden and the Norse world, Viking world basically. And before that, there's quite a few records of this Irish guy called St. Brendan, who also set sail in his little boat with a few disciples, and they came back much later with reports about how they had been blown off course and they landed in this place, which pretty much coincided with the description of that 500 years later Leif Erikson would give to that part of Newfoundland. And even before that, you have a very well documented sense. Brendan's might be slightly dodgy because he was a saint and nobody except the people who actually believed him gave him much credence. But Shen, who was Chinese, actually has a very well documented voyage that they did to a land they called Fusang. And he even goes to the point of saying, look, we sailed like 20,000 li from the coast of China. We sailed east 20,000 li and ended up in this land which he describes with like deserts and the terrain which basically coincides with New Mexico, Baja California, that whole area. Now, I just did a calculation, and the old li in the Chinese system is about a third more than the English mile. And from the coast of China, if you move east into like San Francisco, it's about 7,500 miles, which means that his 20,000 li is quite possible, because the 20,000 li is about 7,000 miles. So it's quite possible that he actually went to, and he has a book which is still in publication, very obscure, that he wrote about his travels, where he describes the peoples he met. He describes a Bronze Age culture and Bronze Age tools and practices of people in this place called Fusang. And so there is quite a number of people that believe that Shen discovered what he calls Fusang was the west coast of America.
So who was the culture? Who was the culture?
The Bronze Age cultures would have been like the Mesoamericans, the first American peoples. And the fact that like there were people there even in like 500 AD or 499 AD means that somebody had discovered the Americas even before that.
Yeah.
Right? And that is because they posit that through DNA evidence and stuff like that, that there were 3 waves of migration that happened during the Ice Age, about 10,000 years ago, where people from Siberia and then later on from like other areas of Asia traveled over a language that was at that time in existence into America. So there were a lot of
Christopher Columbus was the only one who stuck a flag in and said, "I claim this."
and said, "Woohoo! I claim this land." So he got the.
Why doesn't Amerigo get a bullet point?
Amerigo Vespucci. No, actually that's because
Bullet point anyway.
he doesn't. But what happened is, I think it was Walter or somebody who actually named the continent America in honor of Amerigo Vespucci.
He didn't actually discover anything.
He had charted some of the coastline, but he hasn't actually done like massive amounts of exploration in like, Christopher Columbus, he started the massive strait.
That's actually very
Quick
similar to the
Was Leif Erikson Christian?
Leif Erikson?
500.
No, he's a
He was not
Viking.
Christian.
He's a Viking.
But he wasn't a Christian Viking.
No,
Sounds cool.
Okay, because it'd be
How
interesting to see if,
proselytizing, right?
because if he wasn't Christian, and I guess, I don't know.
Well, the thing is this, like Leif Erikson's journey, because it was told in the oral sagas of the Vikings, a lot of people again discredited that until about like, I think 10 years ago, that the archaeologists doing a dig in Newfoundland actually found the settlements, like the ruins of the settlement, and you can now go and see it.
Because the reason I'm asking the question is, Brendan is 500 AD, right?
Yeah.
That's the Dark Ages, no one cares, right? If Erikson is a pagan, no one cares either, then Christopher Columbus is the first Christian European explorer to go there.
Yes, and
So he's the only one who counts then, because they're not going to take it seriously, or
And
even
he
know
had a
about
flag.
it. Exactly.
well,
It looks like
and,
the map.
he actually like propagated like economic trade, so he gets the. But
But
as
it's not
for-
taught anymore in textbooks.
I thought it
yes,
was
because now so many Americans are like objecting to
even the
Columbus.
But that parallel is very similar to when they talk about in Australia about Columbus, sorry, not Columbus, Captain Cook discovering,
we'll come to that. Yes.
discovering Australia.
Yes, we come to that. So America, like if you talk of purely like the person who discovered America, Christopher Columbus wasn't the guy who actually discovered America. It has been done several times over and over again by different people.
Most likely by the Native Americans as well.
Well, first by the Native Americans.
just-
That's what
Yeah.
we're talking about, right?
Where are the Native Americans from?
Then we have this guy,
No.
Magellan, who apart from circumnavigating the world, he has the Straits of Magellan named after him. And
And a ship.
everything from, sorry, and a ship, right? Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that everything from the History Channel to Wikipedia all say like Magellan's credited with like discovering the strait that bears his name. And this book, which Oxford University Press, it was available all this time in the original Portuguese. But there's an English translation now available from OUP. It's written by this guy called Antonio Pigafetta, who was the official chronicler of Magellan's voyages, who traveled with them. And in the book, there's some very interesting things he says. He says, when he was talking about going through South America and going through the Straits of Magellan that Magellan discovered, when he talks about the voyage, Pigafetta writes, when we had gone out of this strait, if we had always navigated to the west, we would have gone without finding any land. And the question of it's like, because he didn't go out of the strait and go, if you travel west, you won't find any land mass all the way to like Antarctica. Because Africa and stuff doesn't come into that whole, I couldn't find the word enough to actually show you. So the question arose that if Magellan actually never went in that direction, because he came out of the Straits of Magellan and went that way, how did he know what was going, that there was no land in that direction? He never went in that direction. So somebody else would have to have gone first to be able to tell him so that he'd know. And there's an even more damning thing in this. He writes later on, this strait, which is rightly called Strait of Magellan, was a round place surrounded by mountains, as I have said. The greater number of the sailors thought that there was no place by which to go out thence, right, to enter into the peaceful sea, which is like the Mare, the Pacific, what they call it. But the Captain General, who is Magellan, said that there was another strait for going out and said he knew it well because he had seen it in charts that were in the possession of Martin of Bohemia, who was another cartographer and a discoverer. So in Pigafetta's journal of Magellan's voyage of discovery, he says that, well, yeah, we didn't think there was a way out, but Magellan said, no, it's cool, there's a way out because I've already seen it in a chart. So he didn't really discover the Strait of Magellan. But for some reason everyone's like, oh, you made it through the strait, that's great, we'll give it your name. But even the History Channel still thinks that Magellan discovered the Strait of Magellan, despite the fact that this guy says otherwise. Because it was already in charts when Magellan was sailing through it. So, and oh, you know who that guy is?
Vasco da Gama.
Vasco da Gama, who's discovered the sea route to India, and there were these other two guys. Okay, so he was basically the first European to reach India by sea, because this is a small portion of a much bigger map.
He wasn't the first European either. Because they found in early, like Erikson.
Sea route to India? Sea route.
Yeah, they found that like people, like Vikings had like Indian idols, Egyptian idols or stuff.
See, but isn't that the other thing? I mean, the Romans annually had a trooper, set of ships coming.
It wasn't sea.
They didn't go around
all
Africa.
the way to India. They never went around the Cape of Good Hope.
How did they get to India?
Land route, right across. There's a beautiful map.
But I thought they sent ships from.
No, you don't even have to go straight to Asia.
But from Alexandria, I think. From Alexandria, the ships went.
That's the port. They never went like a whole circumnavigation out like that whole area, right?
Right.
And there was a beautiful map which I really couldn't like put in because it was too huge to compress. It was called the Tabula Pitaringia, and it was this fantastic 4th century map of which was all the public roads in the Roman Empire. All of Europe, Africa, the middle, like the Middle Eastern thing, all the way into India, every single public road beautifully mapped out in the 4th century. Okay. So anyway, the fact that Vasco da Gama was the first European to reach, he wasn't the first person around the Cape of Good Hope or to discover the sea route to India, because this map this is part of a Korean map, which has a fairly unpronounceable name that I'm too chicken to pronounce, but it's called the Canido in short, right? And this is part of the Canido, which is, okay, so the Canido is the extant copy of it is dated from 1420, but it's thought to be a much older map. These guys rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, like 48 years after the map, the copy of that map. Right? This shows in a lot of detail the Cape of Good Hope and the continent of Africa. In so much detail, so that this is just an English translation, but the original map seems to be made up of maps from the Chinese ocean-going, like whatever traders, and the Arabic ones, because half the names on the map, half the place names, especially in the Middle East, are in Arabic, and the other half are in Chinese. And in fact, like the map is so accurate that there's a spot called Misr on the map. Misr is the old Arabic name for Cairo, and it's exactly on the spot that Cairo is. And even the rivers and stuff like that, they've got slightly off track with the Nile and various things, because obviously nobody had like charted the entire coast. But the
last name as Lake Victoria? Or?
No, they figure that what happened is that people haven't traveled too far in, so this would coincide with desert. So they kind of assume that all this was desert, but it includes the Congo and stuff as well. Obviously people haven't gone that far in.
Right.
But these areas where they have, like the Orange River and stuff like that, apparently is like quite accurately detailed for the time. So even before anybody else had like gone around the Cape of Good Hope, obviously somebody had been going around quite frequently to be able to do such an accurate depiction of it. This is the entirety of the portion that is still in existence of that Canido map. And you see this. And this is a really funny map in a way, because this is how in those days people used to draw maps. It had to do with like ego and power although Africa is really accurately drawn, Asia isn't. This is China, because it was the dominant power in the region. And it was a form of respect that its size and dominance is reflected in the size and dominance on the map. And Korea is suspiciously large as well, because hey, Korea was big in that time too. And Japan is here, because that's how the Koreans view Japan. They were like, and if you look at the entire map stretched out that exists, the whole of Europe is like a blob somewhere in the corner.
And India.
It's like some...
India is just about
That piece next to...
This is the Middle East, which is quite like Sri Lanka.
India's a piece next to
Sri Lanka
Africa.
is huge in some
Yes, because it depends. See, that's the funny part, right? And the whole thing with the maps going north aligning and stuff is very new.
Way too much how
Early,
Even the current map we use is distorted when it comes to
yeah,
India.
but the old maps, you're like, this looks like nothing I have ever seen on a continent, because it wasn't with north as the meridian that way. So sometimes you actually turn the map the other way around before it starts making sense. So this was more of a political map and not like meant to be an accurate like trade map. But it's what everybody found fascinating is the fact that Africa is so accurately drawn. Years and years and years before anybody actually supposedly ever made a sea journey around Africa. And then you come to Captain Cook, who discovered Australia.
Your boy LJ.
Right.
and I'm glad that New Zealanders killed him.
We haven't actually gone that far, but if we go
tried to pull
further
the
and
same-
explore,
tried
we
to pull
might
the
find
same
out.
thing.
Because pretty much everybody discovered Australia before Cook did.
But he had a flag. I
No,
waved
no.
his flag.
And see, this is what I don't understand. Now, I can understand how, say, Leif Erikson's, like, the whole, like, Viking thing would be relevant to the Viking world. And maybe, like, to Western European world or whatever would not take cognizance of that because they're like some barbarian, like, heathens. We don't have to take notice of what they say. So they wouldn't make use of the information. But these are, like, other Europeans, like Portuguese, Spanish, people who, and the thing is, the information, the maps were already in the keeping of the Admiralty. They knew that Australia existed. So I don't know why they decided to just ignore the fact that they already knew Australia existed and issue Cook an order to go and discover if that island actually exists. There were actually, there were some letters written by the admiral, one of the admirals of the fleet or something when Cook came back and was hailed as the discoverer of Australia. He sent a strong letter.
What if it's politics? If they can create a paper trail to suggest that they discovered Australia, then they could say it's theirs.
It could be that because it could be that because
I think it differs from motive as well, because maybe the others had motive of discovery, whereas Cook was looking for somewhere else where they can offload their convicts and prisoners.
Maybe they just didn't have funding for the flag.
Well, see,
You bring the flag, no, I
Australis-
forgot to pack it.
No,
Damn it.
Terra Australis was actually coined by Ptolemy.
Ptolemy's been everywhere.
Aristotle talked about it. No, but the funny part was that it's not that they'd actually gone there and verified that there was a place. He posited that if you look at a map of the world, there's like all this big continental chunk of like Africa and Europe and everything. And then there's Asia, and then this whole bit of space. And that doesn't make sense because to have balance, there should be a big landmass in this area.
Is it Terra Australis meaning unoccupied?
Pretty much, yeah.
Some
Land
of
that's
them
unknown kind of thing, right? So he posited that it doesn't make sense on a map. There can't be this much blank space in this corner, so there should be a pretty big continent here. And everybody kind of fell in with that theory because it made logic.
Also, it makes sense that people would know about it because you have like the Indian Ocean trade route, and that goes through Southeast Asia, and those islands are basically just hopping all the way to, you can hop all the way to Australia.
So
Yeah, the
thing is
Southeast
that-
Asians should have known
But
about it.
as far as the Greeks were concerned, this Terra Australis, they took it as fact. Though there are, I don't know, I haven't come across the records and there's nothing to suggest that there are actual records of people during that time sailing to Australia and coming
Yeah,
back.
this is just hypothetical. That's like me saying
hypothetical.
there's land on the other side of the
But
moon.
that's from where the word Australia came from. It's already coined it first, right?
Maybe it's a case of everyone, maybe the British did a sneaky and let every other culture do a recon, and they go like, oh, these people don't have gunpowder and guns, let's go claim it, and here, pack extra flags.
Funnily,
Smallpox.
Marco Polo's travels. Marco Polo's travels mention this, which for some reason the English thought was highly suspect. Like, who can trust these travels?
Did he drink
right?
silk?
They talked of his faulty,
What's the quote?
So they said some geographers of the 16th century followed this old edition of Marco Polo's travels, and they keep stressing that it's an old edition which has inaccuracies in it. He called this, he said southeast of Java, there is this land which is called, I guess it's beach in, or how do you, whatever you pronounce, beach, right? In their maps of the continent, and Mercator, so what Mercator did was he took Gerard Mercator, who was the first person to actually do a globe.
That's the map we use.
The map we use now, because the actual globe was, he was the first guy to do globe. Otherwise maps were either planispheres or just round flat things on paper, which were planispheres, or you just had a map, flat map, right? So Mercator used Marco Polo's description of like where this thing should be and vaguely what kind of shape it had, and he did a map. And this is Mercator's map. That was Australia. Now, he got New South Wales a little bit, the point should actually be on this side, but in basic shape and location, it's pretty much where Australia
But this is based on whose map? On Marco Polo's map?
Marco Polo's. No, it's based on Marco Polo's descriptions of his travels, where he says southwest of Java, there is a land like this, which is kind of
So this is
basic shape
Mercator's
like
projection of Marco Polo's map.
Yes.
What year was this?
So this was, Mercator was in 1544.
So this is pretty conclusive though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
And
17
goes
years
on.
versus...
Exactly. So, but they're very, this translation is very careful to say the faulty text of Marco Polo, okay, because it was obviously wrong.
Was he Italian?
Italian.
But it obviously wasn't too, right? And based on this faulty text, the Dutch East India Company actually sent people over to look for this Marco Polo's like continent.
Maybe they
which
were just sour that they
exist,
didn't find it.
right? Yeah. And Isaac and Jason Lemaire, actually Jacques Lemaire, they established what they call the Australische Compagnie, which is the Australian company in 1615, to trade with Australia, trade in goods with Australia, right? And they call it Australia because of the old Greek word Australis. So that was in 1615. Cook. And that was the map I showed you. And,
We saw Europe is so much bigger than
and
India.
funnily, there was this quotation, which was a little too long put in here, but when Marco Polo was describing this land called Piri, which is southwest of Java, he also talks about the northernmost tip, which is gold bearing. And that's what prompted everybody to go looking for this like supposedly non-existent island, because he mentions gold. And I looked at a modern map of Australia, and the northernmost tip of Australia, guess where you have gold mines? Ta-da! And somehow Marco Polo knew this. So obviously there had been people, when he was in the Chinese port or sometime during his trades, he had met people who had actually been here and gone, hey,
been mining gold.
There's gold. Now there's gold in a lot of Australia, but the fact that he had said in the northernmost tip of this place, which is southwest of Java and called Piri, it's gold-bearing country.
Not bad for the first intelligence.
So 200 years before Cook ever thought of going anywhere, people already knew that Australia existed and there was gold in it. And in 1642, the Dutch East India Company sent people over to establish like trade routes to Australia. So Cook made it there in
And he got famous.
200 years after like the first map of Australia was drawn.
So this is a clear example of the much aligned Western narrative. Like this actually is Western narrative.
I can't find any other explanation for it.
Okay.
So it's also a case that I think the Australian Aboriginals were extremely welcoming, whereas when he discovered New Zealand and the Mauritius Islands, he actually went in at a time period where they had a sort of a superstitious belief that there was something to do with the moon or whatever. So they were welcome the first time around. But the second time when they went around, it was under a darker period, and they ended up killing him and beheading him and a bunch of his Captain Cook. He died in Mauritius Islands.
But now even more bizarre than this is, it's not just Australia that is discovered. The Dutch East India Company and some of the Portuguese records, there are records of sea captains, and they talk about things of, yes, there is this big landmass like this, but like the tides are really iffy, so it's very difficult to get there. But if you go further along, I mean, the Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea are fine. So you're like, okay, they have the island of Guinea and the Solomon Islands, and they know there's a big island on this side. All that was not, like, it was all old news, like, people knew this 200 years ago.
Yeah, I can't remember whether it was New Zealand or Papua New Guinea, but they custodied him good the second time he went around. I've got a flag!
And the thing is that there's this famous, like, discovery of the Colenso Bell. Right, which missionaries found, like Maoris using as a soup kettle.
Yes.
And that is actually the bell of, like, it has Tamil calligraphy on it. And it's apparently the bell of the, it has the name of the ship on it, the ship's bell. And so what they're saying is that Calicut was a huge port at that time in the Asian region. Calicut was a huge port, and while Europe was still in the dark ages of discovery, you have people like Ibn Battuta talking about, oh yeah, while we were traveling to X, Y, or Z place, we stopped at the port of Calicut for 10 days for like replenishing our funds, and there were 12 zonchi there. Zonchi are what they call Chinese junks.
Junks?
Yeah, Chinese junks. They're big ships. They're big trading vessels. So the thing is, there was a lot of trade going around in this entire area, and a lot of people already knew about it. And the most damning is Cook in his memoirs goes, when he was exploring New Zealand and Australia, he ran aground. Endeavour ran aground, right? On Endeavour Reef. And he recounts extricating himself and setting sail for an area which later became known as Cooktown. And he says, this harbour will do excellently well for our purposes, though it's not as large as I had been told. You're like,
told by who?
You've been told that in case you shipwreck here, this is a really good place to like find timber and outfit your ship because there's a natural harbour. So somebody had already explored all the area that they named Cooktown because he already knew that he could go here. This was the best place. Since I had been told. So that's why, like, the more we read about this, the problems with like Cook being celebrated as discovering Australia, people knew about it so far. But
then he got beheaded in the end. So
well, I guess.
He got his.
But this is this actually makes more sense than the others because people are pretty. It's 1770, but people are pretty sophisticated at the Empire game at this point. They'd mounted an expedition to some place where clearly the Dutch are making money and bringing back gold, and Britain and the Netherlands were in competition at this time, or at least around this period. This was clearly an expedition where they financed based on knowledge. They knew he would go find it, and he was clearly going there, as LJ likes to keep saying throughout this presentation, to plant a flag. Right? This is to legitimize a conquest. This is always PR.
Just going back to the other one, it's also interesting because one thing which I did check out about Fusang being parts of Baja California and Mexico. Funnily, you have the trees that produce lacquer. There is a certain tree which grows in that area of Mexico and California, which produces the resin necessary to make lacquer. And a similar genus of the same tree also grows in China, and they use that to make lacquer. Now,
Really?
yes, and there is one particular, I couldn't find examples of the work online, but there is one particular Indian tribe in Mexico which is famous for lacquer work. They do lacquered boxes and lacquered bowls, right? And none of the other tribes anywhere in the South Americas or in the North Americas does lacquer work. And the thing is that in China, the methods of extracting